The other day my wife said, our daughter should have her own little mini coat rack for her jackets, so she can hang them up herself. I not only thought that this was a great idea, because it would let our daughter partake even more actively in the getting ready to leave the house routine, but it would also free up some space on the other coat racks and, to be honest, also look very cute. But I also thought this would be a great opportunity for me to start experimenting and practicing on making long format videos of my creations and my creative process. Please enjoy this perfectly framed close-up of my knuckles while I continue this soothing narration. A small, simple project like this that I could build, film and finish in a couple of days would let me get my feet wet, as the saying goes. So this is my first foray into long format build or creative makers video making, LFBOMVM for short. One thing I really liked about this project, apart from the small scope, was that it didn't really have to have any plans. As you can see now, I'm kind of designing it and measuring out my required parts directly on the material. The emotional support square is really doing some heavy lifting here as I mark the distances between the hook locations. I'm cutting 2 extra blocks off the end because I'm going to drill out my own plugs, and I want to make a few extra in case I make a mistake or break any of them. This will prove to be a foreshadowing decision. By now, we have gotten far enough into the video that some of the keen-eyed of you might have already gone, is this another pallet wood video? Yep. If you want me to justify my choice of material, I would say, why not? It was free, pine is a perfectly adequate choice of material for a small child's coat rack, and it's also a quite rewarding feeling to reuse and repurpose something discarded and make it your own creation. I'm listening to quite loud music with hearing protection, so I did not hear that I forgot to turn on the vacuum. Fun fact, I'm using an old Nilfisk, commonly referred to as R2D2 by owners of it. That's actually older than I am. First owner was my grandmother, and then my dad, and now me, and I plan on leaving it to my daughter in my will. Back to the for later pile with you. Here I'm using a plug cutter drill bit with a diameter of 10mm. I chose this size not entirely arbitrarily, but close to, because 10mm is a drill bit size I have, and a smaller size didn't feel right, and a larger would have required a Forstner bit, since I did not have a larger drill bit. But that has been added to the shopping list. I'm drilling out 9 plugs because I don't trust the quality of the wood fibers, and in case I break any of them. However, that was not the reason I ended up being glad that I made more than the 5 required. If you're anything like me and always have multiple projects ongoing, the constant cleaning is a must. And I'm setting up the first cut on the bandsaw. I'm not entirely eyeballing it, but I'm trying to get it as close as possible to the bottom of the plugs. You can see when I'm cutting them on the bandsaw that I drilled 3 of them too short. Did I realize that that was what had happened when cutting them on the bandsaw? Of course not. I just thought I had messed up the cut and had some drifting. Did I realize they were too short? Again, nope. Not until way later. Pushing the plugs out was actually quite satisfying. How it escaped me that moving the fence over and making a shallower cut would make them shorter is beyond me. And some more cleaning. You can wait here, little offcuts. I might need you later. The sides of this block of pallet wood has some imperfections, or massive gouges, depending on what part of your vocabulary spectrum you feel like invoking to describe the wood fiber aberrations present in this plank of wood. And I'm thinking about the best way of getting the piece I need out of it. I finally bring out a ruler and guesstimates what I need to take off to have enough left to drill the holes for the plugs. And back to the bandsaw we go. When setting up for these cuts, I mainly focused on clearing the gouges on each side and not aiming for any final depth. I will a little later double check the required drill depth for the plugs and then do another pass on a bandsaw to get it closer to final depth. But this will go through the planer to remove the saw marks, so I can take it to my desired depth there if required.
I'm using a spare piece of wood here to push the piece forward, so I can continue to support it all the way through without putting my fingers in the logging zone.
Rest well on the pile of possible future needs. Remainder of not yet forgotten wood. And now, back to sawing. This time on the table saw, 2 things I want to do here. Take off the not so pretty edge and cut it down to width. I always keep my saw blade in the well and the table saw unplugged when not in use. The table saw is one of the scariest pieces of equipment in my workshop, so I try to show it the respect it deserves. It also protects the blade so it can't accidentally get hit or dinged. It's here that I realized that the riving knife apparently has come loose, which is not good. In the moment I decide that the best option is most likely to just finish the cut and then fix it. Unplugging the table saw from the outlet before shoving my hands into the well with the saw blade. I wasn't happy with the result, so I went back and adjusted the riving knife some more. Plugging it back in and setting up for the next cut. Lowering the blade back into the well. Unplugging the saw. And releasing the fence. Apparently storing the fence tightened down can warp it and make it less accurate. Then I run it through the planer a couple of times on each side to remove all the saw lines and marks from the bandsaw. This process is very satisfying and almost a little meditative. That's a nice looking plank. Even though I had already decided that the plugs were to be placed at a 45-degree angle, I still wanted to visualize it before drilling the holes. A spare piece of wood already cut at a 45-degree angle, some double-sided tape and 2 screw clamps, a drill jig makes. I used a pencil to mark where it needed to be to have it perpendicular. I mark out the center. Go back to the drill press to check that it centers on the drill, and it did. And I basically eyeballed the center line. Then I use an adjustable square set to the center point and make a mark at 5 cm and 10 cm from the center. Turn it over, repeat. Additional camera angles and better framed shots is probably something I should look into. I now have 5 equally spaced marks centered on the center of the board. Great! My arm is the only thing in focus in this shot. Enjoy my dirty flannel shirt. The depth stop on my drill press is lost, so I improvised with some masking tape. Have some loose plan to make a new depth stop myself. Will probably be a fun weekend project. Good excuse to try out some etching. The flannel really looks good this time of year. Oh, and some elbow. Magnificent camera work. Here I cut small strips of 240 grit sandpaper and then used my drill to give all the plugs some sanding, and then I give the boards the same treatment. At this point I realize I forgot to make holes for the mounting screws, so back to the drill press. I used some masking tape to lower the risk of tearing on the newly sanded face of the board. And then mark the hole location on both sides at an equal distance from the edge. And then the center of the width. And then I swap out the drill bit for a countersink so the mounting screws can sit comfortably and not protrude. And some light passes with a sander, and we should be ready for glue up. Throwing things on the table seemed like a good artistic choice at the time. It's still artistic, but I'm kinda questioning the good part now. Hopefully we'll get some good framing and camera work instead. I have yet to realize that some of the plugs are shorter, and I just used 3 of them. I will continue with the glue up, oblivious to this fact. And I should probably start filming with wider shots and zoom in post. The work is happening everywhere but in frame. Once the plugs are in place, I go over them all with a wet towel to remove as much excess wood glue as possible. Because in the next step, I want to stain it all, and stain don't really bite on wood glue. Off camera, I realized that some of the plugs were shorter and quickly replaced them before the glue had time to set. This is an old can of stain that I had, and I decided to just slab on a nice thick layer and then rub the excess off. I had apparently no cloth left in the workshop, so this was sort of a in-the-moment solution. Since stain is prone to spontaneously ignite, I doused the paper towels in water afterwards and placed them in the fireproof container, in preparation to dispose of them correctly at our local recycling center. Once the stain had dried, it was time for finish. I went with French polish. I'm guessing those of you who know about French polish are probably just about now loudly exclaiming,
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
But bear with me and let me back up a step and talk about why I like French polish, why I didn't go with spray lacquer, and then my motivation behind applying it like whisked eggs on a bun. I had used up all my spray lacquer. That was my motivation to not use that. And now let's go on a bit of a tangent. So French polishes are made up of shellac, and then it's dissolved in methylated spirits. So what is shellac? Well, shellac is a resin that is secreted by the female lac bug that lives in India and Thailand. The lac bug eats the sap from the tree and excretes shellac. So tree sap passed through the butt of a bug. Pretty damn natural. And methylated spirits, which is a fancier way of saying denatured alcohol. Alcohol very much not for consumption. The main additive is usually methanol, about 10%, hence the name, methylated spirits. Other common additives include isopropyl alcohol, acetone, methyl ethyl ketone, and methyl isobutyl ketone. Source: Wikipedia. It's a whole tax thing. You should look it up, it's actually quite interesting. But I digress. So why do I like French polishes? Firstly, it has a long tradition. It does not require any propellant or generate a bunch of aerosols. And it's relatively easy to go back and fix or add once hardened, since French polish is shellac dissolved in alcohol. Once the alcohol in the solution has evaporated, it hardens, and to dissolve it again, you add, you guessed it, alcohol. So why my heavy-handed application? Well, I looked at the geometry of the coat hanger and realized that where the plugs meet the board, it's going to be a bit tricky to get an even and nice coverage. And I knew that I had the thermodynamics on my side for a heavier application. The temperature in my workshop was about 10 degrees centigrade, so that is about 283.15 degrees Kelvin. And the evaporation rate of ethanol is about half as fast at 10 degrees as it is at 20 degrees, or normal room temperature. This gives me extra time to work with it without having to dilute it and thereby changing its viscosity. Anyhow, what I did was that I went back with multiple passage, each very thin and progressively more diluted to even out everything, and some sanding on the worst ridges before some finishing coats. This is not the correct way of applying French polish. And I will link an instructional video from Priory Polishes, no affiliation, of how it's supposed to be done in the description. I think it came out great, but most importantly, I enjoyed making it. Is it perfect? No. Was that the plan? Again, no. Making things perfect can of course be very rewarding and sometimes even necessary. But don't let it become a barrier to create. There's a saying, perfection is the enemy of good. There are only so many hours in a week. When we manage to carve out a few hours for our hobbies, sometimes those hours go towards revisiting a bigger project and focusing on perfecting that little part of it. Other times we just want to make something for the joy of making. A finished piece is the result of a series of successfully salvaged mistakes. Until next time.